The Transmigrator, the Art School Dropout. Chapter 1. The Transmigrator, the Art School Dropout. Naoto. What are you doing on the rooftop? Get down here right now. Teacher Matsuzaki. Don't mind me. Let me jump from here. As long as I jump, I can go home. If you want to go home, just ask for leave. Why jump off a building? Are you sick or something? At this moment, a large crowd of onlookers gathered on the playground. For Yamamoto Naoto, who was standing on the rooftop, ready to leap, everyone not only didn't show panic, but seemed exceptionally happy. The reason was that this was already the 10th time Yamamoto Naoto had prepared to jump off a building this month. For the students, this was already commonplace. Hey, do you think that guy will succeed in jumping today? I think it's unlikely. After all, it's already the 10th time this month. I bet he'll succeed today. Has anyone seen Kuriko? She probably went to the restroom. So, why did Yamamoto Naoto want to jump off a building? Of course, we have to start from last month. Yamamoto Naoto, his original name is unknown. In fact, he is a transmigrator from China. That's right, the China which produces all kinds of cultivators, chosen ones, and sons of destiny. And one thing is even more absurd, he was also an art school dropout. One could say he was like a certain little mustache who almost conquered the world. However, the reason for his failure was a bit ridiculous. The original exam question was a sketch, but this guy stubbornly drew it as a manga, and its absurdity made even the teachers grading the papers feel it was a bit too much. After learning of his failure, Yamamoto Naoto was lying on his bed, playing dead, when suddenly the world spun, and he directly arrived in Japan, becoming the current Yamamoto Naoto. Speaking of which, it's quite absurd. If it were just transmigration, that would be fine. Which Chunabu teenager in the new era hasn't thought about such a thing? However, you tell him that becoming a high school student is one thing, but what does it mean becoming an orphan, and that both of his parents are dead? What does it mean that besides him, there's also a younger sister at home? Having a sister and a house, with both parents dead, sounds like a protagonist template. But for Naoto, it was simply too painful. Compared to his current life, he'd rather go home and listen to his parents nag. So, after referencing the methods of his predecessors, Naoto resolutely decided to jump from a high place. Doing so still had at least a 30% chance of returning to his old home. Goodbye, this world. I'm going home. No. Seeing Naoto close his eyes, intending to jump, teacher Matsuzaki felt his life was about to end along with Naoto's. He had worked hard for over a decade as a homeroom teacher, and now a student was preparing to commit suicide under his watch. Wasn't this a joke? However, at this moment, a delicate small hand, at some unknown time, had already appeared behind Naoto. Just like a cat owner grabbing their feline master, Naoto was directly dragged back by the scruff of his neck. I said, you've caused enough trouble, haven't you? Come back with me obediently. Behind Naoto, a pink-haired girl wearing glasses was staring at Naoto with an icy gaze. The girl had no expression at all at this moment, but Naoto could fully feel her anger. And seeing the girl behind him, Naoto immediately cowered like a mouse seeing a cat. Kuriko. Weren't you going to the restroom? With such a big commotion, it would be strange if I could still calmly use the restroom, okay. But in reality, Kuriko was actually still in the restroom just a second ago. She knew Naoto was jumping because she had a premonition that Naoto was causing trouble again. Kuriko Saiki, Yamamoto Naoto's childhood friend. The two have been neighbors since they were 3 years old and have known each other for over a decade now. And Kuriko also has a secret that no one knows, that is, she is a psychic, basically a god. This matter, besides Kuriko's parents, only Naoto knows about it. Even his stupid younger sister at home hasn't noticed this. Therefore, Naoto also became one of Kuriko's few trusted friends. Teacher, this idiot has caused you trouble. Not long after, Kuriko had already dragged Naoto down from the rooftop and apologized to teacher Matsuzaki, who had almost had a heart attack. It's alright, it's alright. It's a good thing you, Kuriko, are here, otherwise, no one would be able to control this guy. Matsuzaki looked at Naoto, who was looking glum at the moment, and ultimately said nothing. In Matsuzaki's eyes, the original Naoto should have been a serious and diligent good student. He only became like this after his parents passed away a year ago. Thinking about it, it makes sense. Which child could remain completely normal after both parents died? That would be the scariest thing. It's already very good that Naoto has Kuriko to keep him in line. Kuriko. It's almost time for school to end, so why don't you take this guy home first? At this moment, even if Matsuzaki had a bigger heart, he didn't dare to let these two stay at school any longer, so he could only let Kuriko take him home first. Kuriko didn't refuse, she just dragged Naoto and walked out of the school. After leaving the school, Kuriko also let go of Naoto's hand, and the two walked side by side towards home. Why did you do this today? I don't want to stay in this world anymore, how's that for a reason? If you die, what about Reika? I don't know. You really are a rotten person. Maybe, say what you want. Although I don't know what you ultimately want to do, I don't want to clean up your corpse. Remember, even if you die, I can still pull you back. Nagging. Along the way, although the two didn't say a word aloud, under Kuriko's telepathy, they actually completed a series of conversations. I'm going home first, see you tomorrow. See you tomorrow. The two at this moment were like ordinary childhood friends, bidding each other farewell. Yamamoto Naoto pushed open the door to his empty home and sat on the sofa like a dead fish. Because Naoto's sister's school is boarding, she only comes home once a week. Recently, however, her sister has been staying at her school, refusing to come back. So, at present, he lives alone in this house. The house left by his parents still had 30 years of mortgage payments. Outstanding, such kind parents. The remaining money was only about 300,000 Japanese yen. Besides the mortgage, he also had to cover his own and his sister's living expenses. Such immense pressure was also the reason Naoto wanted to escape. 300,000 Japanese yen sounds like a lot, but in Japan, he would probably go bankrupt in at most 3 months. Now, only one path lay before him, to work desperately to earn money. He truly didn't want to suddenly go from being a student to a working dog in the future. Strongest manga artist system loading. Detecting suitable host, system automatically updating. Welcome user to system No. 10,086. This system humbly serves you, dedicated to helping you become the strongest manga artist of this century. Just as Naoto was in despair, suddenly, a light blue screen appeared before his eyes. What is this? Looking at the screen that appeared before him, Naoto felt as if he were dreaming. System. Does this mean I'm about to take off? End test chapter. Tomorrow we'll do a small mass release. RavenTheMurkcrow creators thoughts. 1 comments 0 vote. The Birth of Bloodline. Chapter 2. The Birth of Bloodline. Name. Yamamoto Naoto. Physical fitness. 15, 1.5 times that of an ordinary adult. Next level requires 1000 points. Physical condition. Healthy. Talent. Your previous life's artistic talent allows you to quickly grasp any drawing and drawing-related techniques. Drawing level. Masterful. Peak requires 100,000 points. Next drawing skill. Vivid imagery. The viewer can personally experience the environment in the painting through your realistic drawing skills. Required fame points. 10,000 points. Other skills. Karate level 1 skill. Opening next skill slot requires 1000 points. Basic drawing knowledge. Remaining points. 0. Note. Points can increase overall physical attributes. Higher increases in physical fitness require more points. Note. The more people know your name and are attracted by your works, the more points you can obtain. Perhaps it was due to the blessings of his predecessors, the great Chinese transmigrators, that after a month of nearly collapsing, Yamamoto Naoto finally awakened his system. Although this strongest manga artist system had its flaws, Naoto, eager to make money, couldn't care less about them. But speaking of manga, Yamamoto Naoto paced to his desk and pulled out a light yellow envelope from a drawer. After opening the envelope, what came into view were printed manga drafts, with characters already drawn and backgrounds laid out. Looking at the slightly naive drawings on the drafts, many memories surfaced in Naoto's mind at this moment. These manga were drawn by his predecessor, the original Yamamoto Naoto. Like Naoto, the original Yamamoto Naoto also loved manga very much and hoped to become an excellent manga artist in the future. Perhaps it was precisely because of this that Naoto transmigrated into him. The initial reason Naoto became an art student was very simple. He loved manga and wanted to become an excellent manga artist. But after he actually started studying art, he discovered that the gap between the traditional art industry and manga artists was simply too great. Among traditional painters, if 1 in 100 became famous, that was considered good. Most painters died in poverty, to the extent that in many people's eyes, a painting only became valuable after the artist's death. And in order to gain fame, many masters appeared in China who shot ink, sprayed ink, or even used mops to paint. But was that really called painting? Rather than painting, it was more like a circus act. But manga are different, anyone is qualified to draw a manga. Even if your drawing is terrible, as long as you have good ideas and a plot, then you have a chance to succeed. The one who originally guided Naoto to become a manga artist was the famous one. In case you don't realize, one is the mangaka of One Punch Man. Even though his drawings looked like rough drafts, his wild imagination and profound writing deeply captivated him. Moreover, this Japan, compared to the one he knew, although largely similar, lacked many excellent works. Not just mangas. From literature, paintings, TV dramas, and movies, many well-known works were missing from all walks of life. For him, this was an opportunity for success. However, Naoto, who used to be involved in traditional art, didn't understand the techniques of drawing mangas. For example, those well-known works like One Piece, Naruto, and Bleach, a series that has been serialized for over a decade, drawing 1 or 2 chapters might be manageable, but to serialize them long-term, it's not something that can be done simply by snapping your fingers. Fortunately, as a manga enthusiast, Naoto remembered the plots of many excellent works. He could easily recall the plots of future popular manga like Attack on Titan, Tokyo Ghoul, and Demon Slayer. If I want to make money, then Jump is definitely the first choice. But if it's Jump, then some horror works can't be chosen. After careful consideration, Naoto decided to eliminate some options first. First, horror and adult mangas are definitely out, such mangas are not popular in Jump, and might not even get serialized. So, famous works like Ring and Tomy all have to be skipped. And those manga that will be popular in Japan in the future should also be put aside for now. After all, he's just starting out and there's no need to waste those good works. Otherwise, it would be a sin if they were ruined. After thinking for a while, Naoto's gaze fell on the former Chinese manhwas. He recalled that Chinese manhwas also had a glorious history for a long time. In Naoto's opinion, the brilliance of Chinese manhwas was no less than that of Japanese mangas at the time. For example, The Legend of Luo Xiaohei, Peking Opera Cats, Kuiba, and Scissor 7. These were all former pillars of Chinese mangas. A good-looking manga that also fits JUMP's characteristics. Finally, Naoto thought of a work, which was IU's Bloodline. Speaking of IU's work, it was one of Naoto's favorites back then. In the manhwa world at the time, Naoto's favorites were Instant Noodle Superman and Bloodline. The story of a Chunabu teenager growing up during his exile with a vampire was simply irresistible. To this day, he still regrets not being able to see the final ending. It's a pity that IO lost the creative rights to Bloodline due to contract issues. Future manhwa, one after another, failed to reach the height of Bloodline, and most of them ended before they even began. But to this day, in Naoto's eyes, this manhwa is still a god-tier existence. Since the manga's theme was decided, it was time to get to work. Of course, just because Naoto chose this manhwa, doesn't mean he can to copy it one for one. Some of the story wouldn't fit exactly for Japanese audience, therefore, he has to localize it while drawing to fit JUMP's requirements. Naoto picked up his brush and carefully revised the manga draft paper. For some reason, his originally clumsy arm now seemed particularly nimble. This is truly amazing. Could this be the power of the system? After repeatedly watching, learning, and bringing out the images from his memory, exquisite drawings appeared on Naoto's desk at an unimaginable speed. Under Naoto's focused drawing, the first chapter of Bloodline quickly began to take shape. And over the next few weeks, Naoto continuously improved the manga he was drawing. Finally, on a weekend, Naoto looked at the draft in his hand and finally breathed a sigh of relief. Phew, I'm pretty amazing, aren't I? The moment Naoto stopped drawing, a sense of exhaustion quickly overwhelmed him. Naoto, who had been busy for several weeks, finally couldn't hold on and collapsed. So this story references comics, manga, manhwas, and manhwas a lot, therefore I will explain the main difference between the four. Starting with comics, these are graphical novels, where you tell a story through drawings, dialogue through text bubbles. Mangas are similar to comics, but they are made in Japan, and are usually black and white, and are read from right to left. Both manhwas and manhwas are usually digital, and usually colored, and are in a vertical scroll format. Think of solo leveling, however manhwas are from Korea, while manhwas are from China. Here, since Naoto wants to adapt this Chinese manhwa to manga form, I refer to the idea of the original bloodline as manhwa, but Naoto version is adapting the idea into manga form, being black and white, scrolling right to left, etc. RavenTheMurkcrow creators' thoughts. 1 comments 0 vote. The 3 major publishers of Japan. Chapter 3. The 3 major publishers of Japan. Knock knock knock. Outside Naoto's door, Kuriko knocked. These past few days, Naoto had been cooped up in his room as soon as he got home, not going out at all. Kuriko even wondered if he was having dark thoughts or doing something illegal. However, when Kuriko was using clairvoyance to observe, Naoto simply sat at his desk writing and drawing every day, doing who knows what. After being curious for so long, Kuriko finally decided to visit her childhood friend and see what he was up to. Knock knock knock. When the door was knocked again, there was still no one opening it inside the room. At this point, most people would probably assume that the person inside the house must have gone out for something. But who is Kuriko? Kuriko simply glanced up with her eyes and clearly saw Naoto's location. Then, the next moment, Kuriko had already appeared behind Naoto, teleporting. The entire process ended without any obstruction. This guy, he actually fell asleep. Kuriko looked at Naoto, who was sprawled on the table, completely asleep, and was speechless. She was so worried about this guy, and he was just sleeping on the table. Goo hee hee, Kuriko, hee hee hee. While Naoto was sleeping, he not only drooled all over the table but also kept mumbling Kuriko's name. It's unclear what he was dreaming about. In any case, Kuriko had no interest in looking into his dreams. He's such a big person, yet he doesn't know to cover himself with a blanket when he sleeps. Also, the air conditioning in this room is set too low. Kuriko looked at Naoto with a headache. He was already the head of the household, yet he still acted like a child, making people worry. Just as Kuriko was covering Naoto with his blanket, she suddenly saw the manga drafts laid out on Naoto's desk. What is this? Manga. Upon seeing the items on the table, Kuriko, a loyal manga enthusiast, was immediately captivated. The cover depicted a girl, like an elf under the moon, standing atop a tall building, as if she could leap down at any moment. This scene made it impossible for Kuriko to look away. Just by looking at the character on the cover, it felt as if she herself was standing on that tall building. When did Naoto's drawing skills become so good? Kuriko, of course, knew that her childhood friend had a dream of becoming a manga artist. But, honestly, Naoto's drawings back then were uglier than a child's scribbles. Even he himself couldn't stand to look at such things, let alone Kuriko. However, the manga Naoto had drawn now could only be described as exquisite. Kuriko looked at Naoto suspiciously, but found that he was still asleep and hadn't woken up. He was still muttering, Kuriko, I must become the strongest manga artist in Japan. By then, abba. This idiot, could it be that he's been drawing manga all this time? Kuriko, of course, knew about Naoto's current situation. But she hadn't expected that Naoto would actually try to solve it by drawing manga. At the same time, Kuriko also knew how difficult it was to become a professional manga artist. Can this idiot really do it? However, Kuriko looked at the manga in her hand again and finally softened. Ever since his parents died, Naoto's mental state had been unstable. He finally had a glimmer of hope, able to do what he wanted. As his childhood friend, she should help him. With that, Kuriko put the manga into an envelope, intending to show it to her father that evening. Speaking of Kuriko's father, one must mention the 3 major publishing houses in Japan's manga industry. Before Yamamoto Naoto's transmigration, Japan's publishing houses were perhaps Shueisha, Kodansha, and Shogakukan, these 3 known as the Big 3 of manga. As for why Shueisha, Kodansha, and Shogakukan are specifically referred to as the Big 3, only for manga-type magazines. This is because Japan's publishing houses cannot sustain their entire operations solely on manga magazine publishing. To gain more profit, the Big 3 of manga not only publish manga magazines but also other types of books. For example, in his previous life, Shogakukan in Japan primarily generated profit by publishing educational books for elementary school students, with manga publishing merely being one channel for profit. If other areas like light novels and traditional literature were included, the Big 3 wouldn't look so dominant. However, even so, it's undeniable that the Big 3 were still giants. At their peak, the strength of the big three was definitely industry-leading. In the original, The Disastrous Life of Saiki K, Saiki Kusuo's father was just an editor at a small manga publishing house, and the manga he handled had no fame whatsoever. But in this timeline, Kuriko's father, Saiki Kunaharu, is a genuinely famous editor for Weekly Shonen Jump. He even served for a period as an editor for popular manga such as One Piece, Toriko, and Gintama. It's strange, many literary works have disappeared, yet some world-class IPs are still active on Jump, and only Jump is like this. This world is truly odd. And so, Kuriko quietly exited the room, leaving Naoto alone inside. Naoto didn't notice anything unusual even after Kuriko left. In his dream, every manga he drew became a huge success, even becoming textbook-level manga in Japan. He was inundated with various business activities, and news of anime adaptations was endless. And finally, he and Kuriko walked down the aisle together, even having two adorable children. Thus, when Naoto woke up, the sky outside had already grown dim. Huh. Blanket. Where's my manga? Naoto, upon waking, looked at the blanket on him with confusion. Did he have this when he fell asleep? And when he looked again, he found that the manga he had drawn had disappeared. Only a slip of paper fluttered from the desk, catching Naoto's attention. I've taken the manga. I'll show it to my dad later. Take care of yourself, the air conditioning is too low, Kuriko. Seeing the content on the note, Naoto's still groggy mind grew even more confused. Was he dreaming? The Stunning Bloodline. Chapter 4. The Stunning Bloodline. I'm home. In the evening, Kuriko's father, Saiki Kunaharu, returned home, dragging his tired body after a day of work. It's quite something. Kuriko's family could easily become top-tier wealthy in Japan, or even the world. However, Kuriko's father, Kunaharu, preferred to work hard every day rather than use his children's powers to enrich the family. Perhaps, this is the lifestyle of a broad-minded person. Or perhaps it's simply because his family is already very wealthy and doesn't need extra money for this and that. Welcome home, Dad. Saiki Kurumi, Kunaharu's wife, offered a cool towel to her hard-working husband. Phew, I'm alive again. Feeling the cool touch of the towel, Mr. Kunaharu felt alive once more. Ha! Dad, is something wrong? As the family sat at the dining table, Saiki Kunaharu couldn't help but sigh. Even with the delicious meal prepared by his beloved wife, he had no desire to eat a single bite. Seeing this, Mrs. Saiki couldn't help but ask her husband. Nothing, it's just that recently. Hattori's subordinate seems to have a very talented manga artist duo, and I feel a bit pressured. T.N. Hattori is the editor of the two main characters of Bakuman. As an editor at Jump, the work is extremely demanding. Don't think that only manga artists are exhausted at Jump. In reality, editors, in addition to having their own performance evaluations, are often responsible for many things. For example, if something happens to a manga artist under their charge, they are the first ones to go and resolve it. Even if they encounter a delayed submission, they have to bear the pressure and contact the printing factory. A slight mistake could lead to a work crisis. And having an outstanding manga artist under one's wing is also a great honor for an editor. The more famous the manga artist under them, the higher the editor's status in the workplace. A very talented manga artist duo. Yes, both of them are still only middle schoolers. But one of the members of that duo, his uncle, was very talented. Damn it. Hattori got his hands on them. Mr. Kunaharu couldn't help but down the beer on the table, frustrated at losing two potential manga artists from his team. By the way, why haven't I seen Naoto recently? Is he alright? Speaking of which, Mr. Kunaharu was also an open-minded person, he would forget about such things as soon as he mentioned them. It was only then that Mr. Kunaharu remembered he hadn't seen Naoto at their house in a long time. The Saiki family deeply sympathized with the plight of Naoto's family. In fact, after so many years of being neighbors, the Saiki couple had long treated Naoto as their own child. After the Yamamoto couple passed away, the Saiki couple often invited Naoto to their house for meals, but recently, they hadn't seen Naoto, and they were a little afraid that something might have happened to him. Nothing, it's just that he's recently become obsessed with drawing manga. Drawing manga. Hearing Kuriko's words, the Saiki couple were stunned. Naoto, that child, had talent for drawing manga. Here, this is his manga. I brought it out from Naoto's room. With that, Kuriko handed the finished manga drawn by Naoto to her father. Initially, Mr. Kunaharu didn't pay too much attention. After all, how amazing could a manga drawn by a high school student be? Most high school students' drawings, in their eyes, were good enough if they even looked like people, and they would be thankful for that. However, the moment Mr. Kunaharu saw Naoto's manga, he was stunned by the scene before his eyes. A silver-haired girl stood atop a tall building, surrounded by the city lights. It was just a simple composition, yet it made him feel as if he were truly there. Although Mr. Kunaharu hadn't even read the manga yet, he was already captivated by the artwork. No matter what, purely from a drawing skill perspective, this was top tier in the industry. With this level of drawing skill, even if the plot was utter garbage, it would be enough to become a professional artist and earn money. Did Naoto really draw this? You're kidding, right? Mr. Kunaharu still couldn't believe it and quickly flipped to the next pages. In his opinion, a good first drawing didn't necessarily mean the drawing skill would remain consistent throughout. It was like writing an essay. You might maintain good handwriting at the beginning. But later, as you get more and more tired, your writing starts to become sloppy. Many artists' later works become a mess. But what shocked Mr. Kunaharu was that Naoto's drawings not only didn't become sloppy but instead became increasingly exquisite. The art style wasn't simply human-like, it was the kind that, at first glance, you would deeply fall in love with. And because this was a short story created first, this time it actually integrated nearly 3 chapters of Bloodline. The story content was also very simple. Middle school student Yaren gets caught in a war between the Holy Land and the Bloodline because of his ghost sister. To rescue his sister Yaren, Yaren voluntarily becomes Lilo's blood servant and unintentionally becomes close friends with school bully Sage. Later, Yaren and Sage are attacked by Eagle Eye and others from the Mixed Brigade's 9th Squad. On the verge of death, Yaren is embraced by Lilo, moved by his plight, and becomes a newborn bloodline. TN localization, so the names of the characters' name won't be exactly the same as the original Bloodline story. The plot seemed simple, but in reality, it was very captivating. The clues it introduced were also very clever. Yaren constantly conversed with his sister, but in reality, his sister had long passed away. It was actually his sister's ghost that had been by Yaren's side all along. And because his sister was a ghost, it led to the appearance of people from the church, who seemed to be guardians of humanity. The church captured Yaren's sister, forcing him to sign a contract with a vampire. And the vampire princess Lilo, after drinking Yaren's blood, annihilated all members of the church. However, Yaren's school bully friend, believing Yaren to be dead, joined the church. It was precisely because of this that these two friends, by a twist of fate, became enemies. Such a story was a typical shonen tale. Mr. Kunaharu hadn't seen such a good shonen manga in a long time. Moreover, the design of the female protagonist, Lilo, was also very appealing. A mysterious vampire princess, it was as shonen as a plot could get. Actually, the original, Bloodline, from Naoto's world, known to everyone was IU's third arc. Before that, Bloodline, actually had 2 other arcs, which existed as prequels. However, these 2 arcs circulated very little online, and most people's memories still focused on the most classic, Holy Demon Illusion, arc. And the plot of the mobile game started from the first arc. At this moment, Mr. Kunaharu was still in shock. He wished he could run to Naoto's house right now to discuss this manga with him properly. TN, this world isn't exactly just one anime, in fact it's multiple. Currently, we have The Disastrous Life of Saiki K, Bakuman, which you might have heard of, and Rascal Does Not Dream, which you might have noticed from the synopsis. RavenTheMurkcrow creators' thoughts. 0 comments 0 vote. Affairs of the Editorial Department. Chapter 5. Affairs of the Editorial Department. When Saiki Kunaharu asked Naoto if he had any desire to be published in Jump, Naoto's expression was numb. It was simply that Naoto didn't know what kind of expression to make at this moment. After all, although he did incorporate many of the original's essences, he couldn't possibly copy the manhwa's paneling and various details. Such things could only be explored through his own efforts in the end. He had only referenced the styles of a few manga, then created his own Frankenstein's monster, and it actually managed to get noticed. Could it be that drawing manga is really that easy now? After confirming with Saiki Kunaharu multiple times that Kuriko hadn't asked him to do this, Naoto still felt incredible even when he went to school. Hey, that's Jump. In this era, it's a super magazine with weekly sales still in the hundreds of thousands. Hey. Could he really publish his work there? And Mr. Kunaharu didn't hesitate. After confirming Naoto's willingness, he rushed to the editorial department in a hurry. Kunaharu-senpai, what's wrong with you? Seeing Mr. Kunaharu arrive at the office area covered in sweat, his colleagues looked at him with puzzled expressions. He wasn't late today, was he? And isn't it still half an hour before work starts? However, Mr. Kunaharu completely ignored his colleagues at the moment and ran directly into the chief editor's office, finding the chief editor who was currently making coffee. Kunaharu, is something the matter? Chief editor, please take a look at this. The chief editor took the paper bag from Mr. Kunaharu's hand and, with a puzzled expression, pulled out the manga drawn by Naoto. What is this? Upon seeing the manga for the first time, the chief editor's initial reaction was that it was a new work by some author, but upon closer inspection, this art style didn't seem to have any similar existence among JUMP's current authors. So, was it a work by an author from another company submitted to Jump? But that didn't seem right either. Such exquisite artwork, in his memory, only a few had such skill. But even if they weren't top tier in other manga, they were at least pillars of the industry. Why would they submit their work to Jump? This is a manga drawn by my neighbor's child. He's still a high school student. Seeing the chief editor's puzzled expression, Mr. Kunaharu quickly explained. What? This is a high school student's work. After hearing Mr. Kunaharu's words, the chief editor quickly flipped through the rest of the manga. After reading through it, the chief editor was instantly stunned. Indeed, whether it was the beauty of the artwork, the art style, or the captivating power and plot, it didn't look like a beginner's work at all. However, there was still a noticeable unfamiliarity in the paneling and the strength of the visuals. But, this was a high school student. You're telling him this is a high school student's work. What a joke. Has he won any awards before? No, he's just an ordinary high school student. Are his parents or relatives involved in the manga industry? No. As far as I know, his father is an archaeologist, and his mother is a writer. That's truly strange then. Looking at the manga in his hand, the chief editor found it difficult to decide. Ultimately, he decided to hold a meeting first. In the meeting room, the editors sat in their seats, looking puzzled at their superior. Why, after just having a meeting yesterday, do we need another one today? Take a look at this. The chief editor didn't say much at this moment, simply handing the manga in his hand to the editors in the meeting room. The editors carefully flipped through the manga handed to them by the chief editor, their expressions gradually evolving from initial confusion to a deeper bewilderment. Chief editor. Is this a new work by a certain teacher? After flipping through it for a while, one of the editors raised his hand and asked the chief editor. If it were a new work by a certain teacher, it wouldn't warrant such a big fuss, bringing all the editors in, would it? Could it be that a certain teacher in the industry switched companies? No, this is a work by a high school student, said to be Seiki's neighbor's child. What? Upon hearing the editor's statement, everyone immediately looked at Kunaharu, who was sitting silently in his seat. However, at this moment, although Kunaharu's face was expressionless, he was actually overjoyed inside. Feeling somewhat incredulous, the editors, just like the chief editor before them, once again flipped through the manga. No matter how they looked at it, they couldn't believe it was the work of a high school student. Although yesterday's middle school duo, Ashirogi Muto, was already outlandish enough, at least their potential was high, but their actual drawing skills, in their opinion, were indeed quite bad. But now, just one day later, another genius had appeared, and this time, they couldn't even find any flaws. Ahem, everyone, please listen to me for a moment. Just then, Mr. Kunaharu stood up from his seat and said to his colleagues, actually, the author of this manga, his parents have passed away. During this period, the child's mental state has not been very good. According to his teacher, this child even has suicidal tendencies. But recently, ever since he became obsessed with manga, his mental state has improved a lot. And I am very aware of his current family situation, it's not an exaggeration to say it's difficult. So, I implore everyone, please give this child a chance. At this moment, Mr. Kunaharu actually bowed deeply to his colleagues in the meeting room. Although it is often said that Japan is a country with a bowing craftsman spirit, usually, even when apologizing, one would not exceed a 45-degree angle. However, at this moment, Mr. Kunaharu, in order to give Naoto a chance, even performed an extremely rare 90-degree bow. Facing Mr. Kunaharu's plea, many colleagues showed hesitant expressions. This was not only out of pity for Naoto's situation but also their recognition of this manga. After all, the brilliance of this manga made them confident that if it were serialized, it might truly sell well. However, yesterday, everyone had already decided on the short manga to be published this time, and even the original manuscript had already been sent to the printing factory. If they were to change it now, there would be too many problems to deal with. At this moment, the editors all looked at their chief editor. This kind of decision could only be made by the leader. Let's vote by a show of hands. The minority obeys the majority. After a moment of thought, the chief editor finally decided to proceed with a show of hands. Then, those who agree to publish this manga, please raise your hands now. At this moment, in the meeting room, the editors hesitated repeatedly, and finally, a small portion of them raised their hands. Seeing that the number of people was less than half, Mr. Kunaharu's heart sank. Then, those who object, please raise your hands. At this, a few more people sparsely raised their hands. But upon closer inspection, the number was actually the same as those who supported it earlier. So the rest are abstaining. What should we do now? Seeing that both sides were tied, the deputy editor began to speak. Chief editor, I don't think it needs to be so troublesome. Oh. Upon hearing the deputy editor's words, the editors present all perked up their ears. Perfect. Recently, our competition with several other magazines has intensified. So, why don't we just publish an extra issue? We don't need to change the manuscripts that have already been printed. And we can also use this opportunity to promote ourselves. Hearing the assistant editor's suggestion, everyone's eyes lit up. And after seeing that none of the editors objected, Naoto's Bloodline was indeed published in Jump. 0 comments 0 vote. An unexpected encounter in the editorial department. Chapter 6. An unexpected encounter in the editorial department. At 7 o'clock the next morning, Naoto had a rare day off. Because today, he was going with Mr. Kunaharu to the Jump editorial department to discuss the signing of a contract. To be honest, Naoto was a bit excited today. After all, whether it was in his previous life or now, the Jump editorial department was a sacred place in the hearts of otaku. Countless industry bigwigs were all there. Although this world had fewer excellent manga artists, many famous authors were still working here. Like teacher Kubo, Kishimoto, Sorachi the Gorilla, etc. He thought, if he went to the editorial department this time and met these long-established seniors, should he ask for an autograph on a piece of paper? Or should he ask for an autograph on something personal? Knock knock knock. Coming, who is it? Just as Naoto opened the door, standing outside was Kuriko. Looking at Kuriko, dressed in exquisite clothes as if she were going on a pilgrimage, Naoto had a strange expression. Kuriko, what are you going to do? Following you. Father was afraid you'd cause trouble today, so he asked me to watch you. The way you say that, do I look like someone who would cause trouble in the editorial department? Aren't you? Can't argue with that. At this moment, Naoto looked at his childhood friend. To be fair, Kuriko, after changing out of her school uniform, was a total beauty. Her stoic expression, coupled with her cool temperament, made her beautiful face even more stunning. Both the father and mother of the Saiki family were very good-looking, and Kuriko had inherited the best qualities of both. Normally, she didn't seem like much in her school uniform, but Kuriko in casual clothes truly made one's eyes light up. By the way, Kuriko, you wouldn't be intentionally coming with me, would you? Naoto was skeptical about Kuriko saying she was watching him. After all, as childhood friends, he knew Kuriko's personality inside and out. She would never do more than necessary. He knew that Kuriko would rather laze around, eating coffee jelly instead. Especially since this was a request from her father, who basically had no status at home. Unless her father was willing to pay about a box of coffee jelly, Kuriko would never agree. So, there was only one reason for Kuriko to come out. She wanted to go to the Jump editorial department. As a manga enthusiast, Kuriko had been to the Jump editorial department more than once. But those were only when her idiotic father forgot something or was about to be late, and she would follow along. Kuriko had never had the time to properly explore the editorial department or get autographs from those famous authors. This time, with a rare legitimate opportunity to go to the editorial department, how could Kuriko let this matter pass? Let's go, we'll be late soon. Hey, you still haven't told me if it's true. Noisy. Facing Naoto's guess, Kuriko turned and walked out of his sight. However, based on Naoto's guess, he was probably right. Soon, the group arrived at the Jump editorial department. To be fair, even if it was just a subsidiary of Shueisha, the Jump editorial department looked exceptionally impressive at first glance. Since it was working hours, many people could be seen entering and exiting the editorial department. Who are these people? Although they initially came to ask for autographs from big names, Kuriko and Naoto were dumbfounded after arriving. Because they didn't recognize any of these manga artists. Normally, those manga artists didn't show their true faces, so most people, even if they saw them, probably wouldn't guess who these people were. Sorry, I didn't see clearly. Just then, two teenagers walked towards Naoto. At this moment, the two seemed exceptionally excited, so much so that they didn't see Naoto as they approached and accidentally bumped into him. It's okay. Naoto initially didn't pay attention to the two teenagers, but after a while, he remembered, why were there teenagers here? Wait a minute, those two just now, they should be middle school students, right? Why are there middle school students here? At this moment, Naoto turned his head, looking suspiciously at the two teenagers who had already walked away. Could it be that they were also manga artists? Oh, Kunaharu, you're here. This must be the person you mentioned. At this time, the chief editor of Jump walked out of his office and happened to see Naoto looking back. Yes, chief editor, this is Naoto, whom I told you about. Naoto, this is editor Sasaki. Mr. Kunaharu quickly introduced Naoto after seeing the chief editor. Hello, editor Sasaki. Hello. You seem very concerned about those two children. Yes, I am. Seeing that the chief editor had instantly seen through his thoughts, Naoto could only nod. Those two children are the newcomers who will be published with you this time, the Ashirogi Muto duo. They are very young, aren't they? They are still middle school students. Ashirogi Muto. Naoto was stunned after hearing that name. Is there a problem? Oh, right, this name is the pen name they just adopted. As for their real names, you'll have to ask them. At this time, the chief editor thought Naoto was surprised that the two only had one name, and he carefully explained it to him. However, what he didn't know was that Naoto's surprise at this moment was not about this at all. Perhaps, Ashirogi Muto was not a famous figure yet. But in fact, the prototypes of these two were genuine industry gods. As a manga enthusiast, Naoto naturally knew that these two were the main characters in Bakuman, which was created by Takeshi Obata and Tsugumi Oba. The manga Death Note, which they also collaborated on, remained a timeless classic until Naoto's transmigration. Not to mention, Takeshi Obata was also the famous artist behind Hikaru no Go. It could be said that a large number of manga artists in modern Jump were promoted by these two. And in the manga, these two were not simple characters either. Although the Ashirogi Muto duo experienced many hardships and it took them 10 years as manga artists to get their work animated, they had excellent connections within the editorial department, and almost all of the top authors were their friends. They not only cultivated many excellent manga artists but were also the only rivals recognized by Niyazuma Eiji, the future ace manga artist of Jump. Their strength should not be underestimated. Wait, chief editor, you just said that their work will also be published in this issue of the magazine. Yes, their work, Two Earths, is also an extremely wonderful short manga. If you've read it, you should like them. However, the chief editor didn't know that Naoto's face immediately fell after learning this. No way, he actually had to compete with Ashirogi Muto for this serialization spot. You must be kidding. 0 comments 0 vote. My name is 1. Chapter 7. Chapter 7. My name is 1. Following the chief editor, they entered the Jump editorial building. Soon, the scene inside came into full view of Kuriko and Naoto. The editorial department during working hours, to be honest, was different from what they had imagined. Originally, they thought that as the Jump editorial department, it should be a place full of otaku culture, with all kinds of manga merchandise piled throughout the company. But after walking in, they found that it looked not much different from an ordinary company. Aside from posters for the latest Naruto movie and information on the latest One Piece merchandise displayed in the corridors, the editors at work were not much different from ordinary office workers. Sit down. Sitting on the sofa, editor Sasaki placed Naoto's previous manga manuscript on the table, looking at Naoto with a somewhat serious expression. At this time, Kuriko and Mr. Kunaharu had consciously left and were not by Naoto's side. To be honest, this situation made Naoto a bit uncomfortable, feeling rather like being called into the teacher's office for a talk. Then, Mr. Naoto, are you sure you want to submit this manga to our Jump? Yes, I'm very sure. Naoto answered somewhat nervously to the editor's question. Is that so? Although it might be a bit redundant to ask, are you sure you can do everything a manga artist needs to do? You know, you're still just a high school student. Editor Sasaki looked at Naoto seriously at this moment. It was indeed true that Naoto's manga had great potential. However, as a high school student, while balancing academics, he also had to draw a high-quality manga chapter every week. Such pressure was not something an average person could bear. Think about the duo of Saiko and Akito in the original work. After entering high school, they almost didn't make it through. Under intense pressure, Saiko almost died, which led to the suspension of their serialized manga at the time. In Jump, even professional manga artists often died from overwork due to high-intensity work. Saiko's uncle also passed away due to severe overexertion from high-intensity work. It was precisely because of this that editor Sasaki himself was not very keen on Naoto becoming a manga artist right now. There's one more thing, and that is why you want to become a manga artist. Do you truly regard this job as a sacred profession? Facing the editor's aggressive stance, Naoto took a deep breath, then slowly exhaled. Yes, I am very confident that I can do it. For no other reason than my love for manga, that's why I chose to become a manga artist. Oh. The editor looked at Naoto with some surprise. He hadn't expected a high school student to answer so resolutely. Chief editor, I'm sure you've seen my drawings. Purely from an artistic perspective, I believe my skills are quite good. Although I am indeed very short on money right now, I can completely use these drawing skills to work as a novel illustrator or take on commissions from game companies. Such work would be easier in terms of both workload and working hours. I could even submit my manga to the other two companies, or publish it in a monthly magazine, which are all good options. But I still chose to become a manga artist, and I chose Jump. This is because I want to become the world's #1 manga artist. After hearing Naoto's words, Mr. Kunaharu and Kuriko, who were secretly listening behind him, were stunned. Originally, they both thought that Naoto simply wanted to earn money by drawing manga, but now, they both felt Naoto's ambition in his words. I admit that I initially started drawing manga simply because my family was truly out of money. But when I finished my first drawing, the emptiness in my heart was already filled with that sense of satisfaction. I truly love manga. At this moment, everything Naoto said to the editor was his most genuine feeling. That feeling, when he saw one vivid character after another being born from his pen, was more intense than ever before. The world's #1 manga artist, huh? The chief editor looked blankly at the young man in front of him. He had seen many manga artists make grand declarations and many talented creators. But when he saw Naoto, he couldn't help but feel that this young man might actually succeed. So, no matter what, thank you for this opportunity. Regardless of the final outcome, at least I've tried my best. Even if I fail, I will continue to work hard until the day my dream succeeds. Seeing that Naoto's attitude was so resolute, editor Sasaki ultimately held back the words he had originally intended to say. In an era where manga was starting to decline, perhaps it was precisely these people, full of passion for manga, who could revitalize the industry. In any case, since he had shown his determination, he didn't mind giving this young man a chance. So, have you thought of a pen name for yourself? Although using your real name is also acceptable, doing so might cause some unnecessary trouble. A pen name. On the way, Naoto had considered many pen names, but none felt quite right. After careful consideration, Naoto finally wrote down his pen name on paper. 1. Looking at this uniquely styled pen name, the editor looked at Naoto with confusion. Only one. No. One. Perfect one. This is the meaning of my pen name. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it the best. I want to be the unique, the first, the perfect one in the manga world. After much deliberation, Naoto finally decided on his pen name. 1. Whose art style was like that of an elementary school student, nevertheless drew the impressive One Punch Man, and also Mob Psycho 100. Even when one was almost starving and had to work part-time, he never gave up on his manga, eventually becoming a master cartoonist admired by the younger generation. A mangaka driven by interest. Indeed, Naoto also wanted to be such a mangaka. Because there was no trace of Onsensei's existence in this world. So Naoto chose to become one himself. 1. I hope you can truly become the one in your heart. Thus, Naoto's pen name was set. What kind of storm would the name The One stir up in this world? 0 comments 0 vote. Jump released. Chapter 8. Jump released. Monday, it was again the day for the weekly Shonen Jump, to be released. As the favorite of Japanese teenagers, many young people flocked to buy Jump early every Monday morning. In fact, not only teenagers, but many adults also really liked these manga, as many of them were childhood memories they had been reading since they were young. After buying manga, teenagers would usually take them to school to read with friends, then discuss the future developments of classic manga, and also evaluate new manga. However, Saiko and Akito did not belong to any of the above categories. As readers, this time they were more like manga authors, wanting to see how their work performed. Saiko. Look. Our work really got published in Jump. It's like a dream. This isn't a dream. Akito. Look, our work. Seeing their hard-drawn work actually appear on the Jump stage, and being only middle schoolers, they wanted to shout with excitement in the street right now. If they weren't concerned about the gazes of other people on the street, they probably would have done so. After excitedly reading their work in Jump, the two gradually calmed down. Once calm, their attention turned to other short manga. As the saying goes, know yourself and your enemy, and you will never be defeated. If they wanted to get serialized, they naturally needed to know the strength of their opponents. Everyone drew pretty well. But compared to us, they're still far behind. Just as the two were excitedly looking at the manga in their hands, fantasizing that they were already about to become serialized mangaka, the next manga made both of them freeze. On the cover, a silver-haired girl stood atop a tall building, holding a blade that emitted a crimson glow. Even in the blank space of the image, it read, starring Lilo. Director, lighting, photography, makeup. 1. It made it look like a movie at first glance. Next, the main story began. Yaren, the male lead, initially claimed his real name was Yaren, and that he was actually a vampire hunter. Just as Saiko and Akito wondered why a vampire hunter would wear a high school uniform, the next scene shifted to the protagonist being bullied by a school bully. Even now, the male lead still insisted that he was merely enduring. This person, is he a chunibyo? Yes, definitely a chunibyo. Seeing the male lead Yaren's appearance, Akito and Saiko immediately understood the protagonist's setting. He was probably just a chunibyo who blustered a lot but had no real ability. Immediately after, the male lead's older sister appeared beside him, scolding him not to fantasize about all those imaginary things all day. However, the subsequent plot left the two confused. When the male lead heard his sister say she was being followed, Yaren's first reaction was to seek help from the teachers. But the teachers seemed to not see Yaren at all leaving in unison, as if deliberately avoiding Yaren. In the next part of the story, the vampire Lilo appeared before the siblings. At the same time, a priest from the church also appeared. During this process, the male lead recalled that his sister had already died, and the one who had been by his side was merely her soul. To save his sister, the male lead had no choice but to make a pact with the vampire Lilo. Trading all his blood, he had Lilo repel the priests. Although the ending was still the male lead and his sister laughing happily. However, the envelope Lilo sent, marked with the number 666, laid a foreshadowing for the story to come. After reading this manga, Saiko and Akito couldn't help but fall into a brief silence. They were also new manga artists, but the other person's skill was completely beyond what they could compare to. The paneling, the artwork, the narrative structure, there was absolutely no trace of a novice. Although the first chapter of Bloodline might seem a bit cliché by today's standards, at this point in the parallel timeline, it appeared very interesting. Moreover, as a short story to determine serialization, the plot was very complete, making one feel an irresistible desire to keep reading. Compared to Bloodline, the manga they drew was simply like trash. No way. This person is just a high school student. At this moment, Akito unexpectedly saw in the author's introduction that the author of this manga, 1, was merely a high school student. Didn't this mean that this person was roughly the same age as them? Looking at the other person's skill, and then looking at theirs, the two suddenly felt their confidence had been struck. And it wasn't just Akito and Saiko, these two new authors, who felt this way. Many veterans who had been in the industry for 2 or 3 years or even longer also felt a sense of crisis after seeing this manga. An unknown high school newcomer actually possessed such terrifying drawing skills, it was simply horrifying. And this was based on his first time drawing manga. In a few more years, even if his original ability was terrible, if he just found someone to collaborate with on a manga, he could probably become a big shot. Where did the Jump editors find such a monster? But what they didn't know was that Naoto's skill was entirely due to the system's cheat. If he had drawn this manga himself, having about half the skill would have been considered good. But no matter what, Mr. Kunaharu was already beaming with joy. Naoto was so capable, even if his future editor wasn't him, he would still have plenty of face, wouldn't he? Just imagine being the father-in-law of a top mangaka in the future, wouldn't that give him even more face? Mr. Kunaharu had now completely sold his daughter without any psychological burden. Anyway, in his opinion, there was no man in this world who would dare to dump his daughter. Dare to provoke Kuriko. He would be dead without a burial place in minutes. At this time, Naoto didn't know what was going on with his manga. He had already returned to school with Kuriko after a long absence, resuming his school life. Yo, isn't that Naoto? What? Finally decided to come back this time. However, just as Naoto opened the door, a troublesome friend appeared before him, making his face fall. 0 comments 0 vote. My troublesome friend. Chapter 9. My troublesome friend. Yo. Isn't this our pighead Sakuta? Long time no see. Has your so-called adolescence syndrome finally been cured? Facing his troublesome friend's greeting, Naoto returned the favor in the same manner. But, just when outsiders might have thought the two were about to fight, they both burst out laughing. PFF'd, you've been gone for a few days, I thought Kuriko-chan had chopped you into pieces. No see. Kuriko is a gentle, cute, and understanding beautiful girl, how could she do such a cruel thing? Is that so? How come I remember someone being carried out of school by her last time? One moment, the atmosphere was thick with tension, and the next, the two were already chatting and laughing. Perhaps, the so-called friendship between men is just that simple. Azusagawa Sakuta, nicknamed Pighead. He was one of Naoto's few good friends at school. To be precise, the two only became good friends after Naoto's transmigration. In the original Naoto's eyes, this guy was purely a weirdo. Sakuta transferred to this school last semester. It was said that before, Sakuta had always attended other schools. But one time, because of his sister, he transformed into an enraged war god, causing a huge uproar online and having to transfer schools. And Sakuta's family, compared to Naoto's, was tragic on another level. It was said that not only did Sakuta's sister suffer from severe autism, but even his mother went insane because of his sister's condition. For better treatment, his mother stayed with his father, while Sakuta took care of his sister alone. Their acquaintance was also quite interesting. One time, when Naoto went to the rooftop to jump, he coincidentally saw Sakuta eating alone on the balcony. Out of curiosity, the two somehow started talking. Why do you want to jump? Because I don't want to stay in this world anymore. Why? Isn't life good? The pressure is too great. My parents are gone, and I have a foolish sister to support. I feel like maybe going to another world might be easier. Ah, that sounds a bit interesting indeed. When talking to Naoto, Sakuta initially thought Naoto was just a simple chunibyo patient. But unexpectedly, this person actually wanted to jump. However, just as Naoto was about to jump, Kuriko came out, saw the two struggling, and without a word, knocked them both to the ground. Actually, Sakuta saw Naoto really wanted to jump and was just trying to stop him. And after that, Naoto saw Sakuta on the rooftop more than once, and Sakuta also saw Naoto being beaten to the ground by Kuriko again and again. Through these encounters, the two became friends. Kuriko said you actually submitted to the jump editorial department. How did it go? Did you succeed? After sitting down, Sakuta familiarly asked Naoto. Apparently, the incident of Kuriko taking leave from school last time had already spread within a certain small circle. Oh, it went pretty well. Jump comes out today, so you should be able to see my manga. Really? Sakuta looked at Naoto with a surprised expression. When he first met this unreliable guy, how did he not notice he had such skill? Serialized in Jump. What a joke. Are you saying you're about to become a big star? Then you'll have to give me an autograph, preferably several. I'll sell them later. Keep it down, keep it down. It's just published, it's not even guaranteed to be serialized yet. Facing Sakuta's shock, Naoto couldn't help but feel a little flattered. Was this what it felt like to be famous? It didn't seem bad at all. Actually, Sakuta himself probably couldn't imagine that when it came to being famous, he would later confess in front of all the teachers and students, and even have a popular celebrity girlfriend and a sister-in-law who joined an idol group. That would be a truly famous person at school. Ding dong, ding dong. At this moment, the class bell began to ring, and soon teacher Matsuzaki, the homeroom teacher, walked in holding a document. Students, today, I have some unfortunate news to tell you. Our class has been selected to participate in the National School Art Competition. When teacher Matsuzaki said this, the students below were first stunned, and then cries of lament spread everywhere. National School Art Competition. No matter which school students, upon hearing about these strange activities, their first reaction was boredom. It made sense, their daily time was already not enough, so who would want to participate in these strange competitions? Cough, cough, cough. Everyone, there's no need to panic. While this competition is mandatory, theoretically, only one person from each class is needed. As it's a national competition, the participants' works will be judged nationwide. So, are there any students who are confident in their abilities? Anyone willing to volunteer? When teacher Matsuzaki said this, the students who had been wailing and complaining instantly quieted down like obedient children, sitting upright, afraid that teacher Matsuzaki might be displeased and make them participate. Are you kidding me? A national competition. This might just be an easy way to lose reputation across the entire country. Who would dare? Although there were a few in the class who were quite satisfied with their own skill level, as soon as they heard it would be broadcast nationwide, they immediately chickened out. At this moment, all the students were cautiously looking around, searching for someone who could become a sacrificial lamb. This is going to be difficult. Seeing that not a single person in the entire class dared to participate in the competition, teacher Matsuzaki's expression also began to turn ugly. It was always fine when teacher Hiratsuka's class next door announced an event. Why was his class so uncooperative? Achoo! Just then, Sakuta sneezed for some unknown reason. By the time Sakuta came to his senses, he found that everyone in the entire class was staring at him. Oh no, this is bad. Seeing the entire class looking at him with eyes like they were looking at a sacrificial offering, Sakuta even got goosebumps. Oh no, if he participated in this competition, he would become a complete laughingstock. He. Suddenly, a faint chuckle reached Sakuta's ears. At this moment, Sakuta saw his bad friend, Naoto, lie on his desk, his body twitching. No need to think, this guy must be laughing, right? He must be. Sakuta looked at his bad friend like this and wondered if he shouldn't just kill him. Was he saving him for the new year? Since Naoto, you've done something like this, don't blame me for being disloyal. Teacher. I recommend Yamamoto as the participant for this event. This guy, Naoto, his work has already been published in Jump. When Sakuta said this, Naoto was dumbfounded, and the class erupted. Jump. Is it that asterisk Jump? No way. Yamamoto's work is in it. You're kidding, right? That Yamamoto. Wait, there are only 2 short stories in Jump this time. Is Naoto, Ashirogi Muto or one? Are you stupid? Ashirogi Muto are only middle schoolers, one is a high schooler. Do you even need to think about it? Naoto is one. Seeing his identity exposed just like that, Naoto immediately clutched his chest, looking at Sakuta in disbelief. However, Sakuta looked at Naoto with an indifferent expression. Good luck. Just as Naoto was about to argue that manga and traditional paintings were different, he found that the entire class had already designated him as the sacrificial lamb. Even teacher Matsuzaki looked at him with a relieved expression. He hadn't expected that Yamamoto would actually become a manga artist. Sure enough, Kuriko still had a way. It was truly wonderful that she could bring his spirit back. Naoto looked at the eyes of the people around him and knew that this time, there was no escaping it. And all of this was to blame on his damn bad friend. 0 comments 0 vote. The Most Beautiful Smile. Chapter 10. The Most Beautiful Smile. It's over, how am I supposed to paint this? At his desk at home, Naoto was currently lying on the table, troubled, his mind a complete mess. Although he had repeatedly explained that manga and traditional oil painting were completely different things, those resentful classmates in the class completely disregarded these details. It was like how older generations believed that anyone who studied computers would definitely know how to fix them. These people also thought that someone who could draw manga should also be able to paint oil paintings. Oh my goodness, even when he was an art student, he usually only dealt with sketches. Have you ever seen a high school art student learn oil painting? That's just being idle. It's not even on the college entrance exam. Although he had, out of boredom, sought out a few seniors to try oil painting, that stuff was truly too tormenting. Even if he painted from morning to night, it would take at least a week. And that didn't even include the time spent brainstorming themes. The most infuriating thing was that the submission deadline was only half a month away. He not only had to finish the vampire manuscript but also an oil painting. The workload was simply inhuman. Fortunately, after the teachers in the class learned about Naoto's situation, they kindly allowed him to take 3 days off to find inspiration, and subsequently, he could selectively skip some homework for the following week. Otherwise, he would have truly refused this task. And even more fortunately, the system's boost to his painting skills wasn't limited to just manga. Whether it was sketching, oil painting, or even traditional Chinese painting, he could now draw them all. Otherwise, the specialized knowledge alone would have completely stumped him. Let me think, the theme for this time is, the most beautiful smile. How should I paint it? Simply put, this theme sounded very simple. Naoto, having been tormented by the exam-oriented education of the Great Heavenly Dynasty, felt that this was merely child's play compared to a college entrance exam essay. However, if you were to say it was an essay, it would be fine, but if you had to turn it into a painting, then it became a bit difficult. What is the most beautiful smile? 1,000 people have 1,000 different answers in their hearts. In the eyes of most students in the Great Heavenly Dynasty, they would probably start thinking about things like, labor is glorious, or praising some great moral. In Naoto's mind alone, there were a series of concepts like a farmer's smile, serving the people, and the beauty of life. It's not that these are bad, but to express them through oil painting truly tests the artist's skill. For instance, when it comes to depicting a single figure in oil painting, the strongest example should be teacher Luo's father. As one of the 10 best oil paintings in the Heavenly Dynasty, although it only depicts a farmer, it conveys a great deal. And to depict so much in a single painting, it requires someone of master-level existence. Naoto admitted that even with the system's help, he couldn't compare to those top masters. Therefore, this became the reason for Naoto's difficulty. He watched as time passed, yet he showed no sign of putting pen to paper. If the deadline arrived and he still couldn't submit a piece, he would probably become the laughingstock of the entire class. Seeing that it was already late at night and still without a clue, Naoto walked alone to the balcony. Due to the Yamamoto family and the Saiki family being neighbors, their balconies were almost less than 1.5 meters apart. It would probably only take one standing jump to reach the other's home. And the most interesting thing was that Naoto's room directly faced Kuriko's room. At this moment, Naoto looked at Kuriko's pitch-black room and couldn't help but sigh. Yes, it's this late, Kuriko should be asleep by now, right? Thinking this, Naoto felt that he was too miserable. It was so late, and he was still staying up late for an oil painting. Is something wrong? Whoa. Just as Naoto was about to continue agonizing, Kuriko had appeared behind Naoto at some point. Even though he was already accustomed to Kuriko's sudden appearances, he couldn't help but be startled this time. Nan Kuriko. What are you doing here? I sensed your telepathy and came over. Naoto almost forgot that Kuriko's telepathy could reach her mind even if he didn't speak. You seem to be very troubled. At this moment, Kuriko also understood Naoto's inner turmoil. The frustration of not knowing how to create a piece was currently making Naoto quite distraught. Then, let's go to that place. That place. Naoto heard Kuriko's words and, before he could react, was already teleported by Kuriko to a small hill. At this moment, the bright moon and the dazzling galaxy appeared simultaneously above their heads. The serene small forest quietly nestled at the foot of the mountain, appearing exceptionally deep and secluded. In the distance, the hooting of owls occasionally echoed, and the cool evening breeze, even on this night nearing summer, felt so refreshing. Where is this? Don't you remember? This is where we camped together when we were little. Seeing that Naoto didn't remember this place, Kuriko thoughtfully told him. Hearing Kuriko's explanation, Naoto suddenly remembered that when his predecessor was young, he seemed to have participated in a summer camp with Kuriko, and this was where they had camped. Before high school, whenever Naoto was sad, Kuriko would bring him here, and they would quietly gaze at the sky together. It seemed as if just doing this could cast away all worries. Even at night, everything around them didn't feel eerie at all, instead, it appeared so vibrant. In such an environment, Naoto's inner anxiety also seemed to truly begin to recede. Do you still remember? We were in that little stream back then. You tried to splash me with water, but you ended up being swept away by the current I summoned. Ah, I remember. Your psychic powers were getting stronger and stronger back then, becoming difficult to control. So much so that you would often cause great harm. So you didn't dare to play with other children, and only I stubbornly stayed by your side. The two walked along the forest path, constantly reminiscing about their childhood. Back then, Kuriko could destroy a mountain and fill a river with a single use of her psychic powers. She was practically a walking natural disaster. Facing such a situation, Kuriko was very afraid of harming others, so much so that she had almost no friends and appeared exceptionally reclusive. But miraculously, even when Naoto was little, he was never afraid of Kuriko. Whether it was when they were playing in the water and he was almost swept away by the giant wave Kuriko summoned, or when they were playing hide and seek, and he was directly buried in the dirt by Kuriko, almost dying, or when Kuriko used her psychic powers to restore his body, turning him directly into a baby or something like that. But Naoto was never afraid of Kuriko. He always considered Kuriko his best friend. After that, Kuriko's older sister, Kusuke, created a controller that could suppress Kuriko's psychic powers, and only then did Naoto stop getting injured. However, their relationship grew better and better. Thinking about it now, the reason I am the way I am now is all because of your help. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid I would have become a strange person. At this moment, Kuriko was very grateful that she could meet Naoto. Although she still couldn't be considered sociable in class, her interactions with everyone still made her very happy. All of this was due to Naoto always helping her. Once, Kuriko had also been to a world where Naoto didn't exist. Her counterpart there was actually a boy. In Kuriko's opinion, his personality was simply too aloof. Although he later successfully made friends and his personality improved a lot, Kuriko still couldn't stand the reclusive personality that led him to move constantly. So, Naoto, although I know your heart is filled with sorrow after your father and mother passed away, just as you have always been by my side, I will also always be by your side. Please, you must cheer up. Under the starry sky, the girl named Kuriko Saiki slowly extended her hand towards Naoto. A faint smile appeared on the girl's face. At this moment, Naoto felt as if he had seen a legendary fairy. Kuriko, I think I know what I need to paint. 0 comments 0 vote. Night Sky, Girl, and Smile. Chapter 11. Night Sky, Girl, and Smile. Days passed, and Naoto's painting began to improve day by day. After that night, Naoto felt as if his inspiration had exploded, and he only wanted to finish this painting. He only had 3 days of vacation, but Naoto stubbornly dragged it out to 5 days. Under the night sky, Kuriko and he walked hand in hand towards the unknown forest. Around them, fireflies filled the air, and young birds sang loudly. Naoto was so engrossed in his painting that he didn't even pay attention to his manga work. If Kuriko didn't come over every day to check on Naoto, he probably would have forgotten to eat. When Naoto, engrossed in his painting, finally finished his work, even he himself couldn't imagine that it was something he had created. The entire sky was rendered in cool gray tones, reducing the coldness of the night, while the distant forest and Kuriko in the foreground occupied most of the painting. The interplay of light and shadow gave the entire picture a vibrant, dynamic feel. Although Naoto himself didn't possess extensive knowledge of oil painting. But when he saw this painting, he believed it was in no way inferior to the works of professional oil painting masters. And by the time Naoto finished this painting, there was only 1 day left until the submission deadline. Although he felt extremely exhausted both mentally and physically, Naoto decided to deliver the painting to the organizers first. Following the address given by teacher Matsuzaki, Naoto quickly arrived at his destination. He saw 3 large characters formed by the 3 primary colors on the tall building ahead, AES. The Japan Art Education Association, an art society specifically established to support art education, was considered the largest art association in Tokyo. The most famous events of this association were the renowned Japan Youth Arts Award and the National High School Art Competition held this time. Although one competition was for all Japanese youth, and the other was only for all Japanese high school students. Both had extremely high prestige. It was said that the top prize winners of both competitions could receive rewards exceeding 500,000 yen. Although it seemed like a small reward, here, if you could win first place, it meant your future would take off immediately. Not only would any art university in the country open its doors to you, but you would also gain eligibility to participate in various professional competitions in the future. However, for Naoto today, he didn't pay any attention to this. Although he had some confidence in his painting, he didn't think he could win first place. After all, art isn't something that's good just because you think it's good, it's only okay if those in high places think it's good. In Naoto's opinion, as long as he completed the task given by teacher Matsuzaki, he would be free. After Naoto walked in, the staff looked at the tired Naoto, quite surprised. When they learned that he was there for the National High School Art Competition, their expressions became even stranger. While it was true that some people had submitted their works recently, those were mostly last-minute entries. People who typically knew about this competition had already submitted their paintings on the first day, or at the very latest, by the middle of the period. Who submits their work when the deadline is almost here? However, the receptionist, seeing Naoto's exhaustion, didn't say anything more. She just took the painting and left. After seeing his painting finally submitted, the exhausted Naoto stumbled home in a daze. He didn't even make it upstairs before falling asleep on the sofa. And while Naoto was on his way home, he never expected that a dramatic event would occur. After Naoto handed his work to the receptionist at the front desk, President Fujino, as the organizer of the competition, was currently reviewing the submitted works with a group of judges. Due to this being a national competition, a great many works had been received. Even though the submission deadline hadn't arrived yet, the judges had already reviewed the vast majority of the submitted works. It was at this moment that the receptionist, holding Naoto's work, happened to walk in. President, new works have been submitted. Works. Now. President Fujino and the experts were stunned upon hearing the receptionist's words. There was only half an hour left until closing time, right? Could someone still submit something at this hour? Whose is it? I'm not sure, but it looks like a student from a nearby high school. I see. Bring it over and let's take a look. Looking at the tightly wrapped painting in the receptionist's hand, the judges, who had already reviewed many works, couldn't help but become curious. They thought, since it was a work that needed to be reviewed anyway, they might as well take it out and look at it now. However, when President Fujino opened the painting, he was stunned by the scene before him. Under the night sky, a pink-haired girl extended her right hand with a gentle smile. In the distance was a tranquil forest filled with fireflies. It was just a simple painting of a girl, yet President Fujino saw many emotions in the girl's smile. It was as if she was inviting her lover to a mysterious place, and for a moment, it made President Fujino, who was almost 60 years old, feel the sweet love of youth. In that smile, President Fujino even recalled his first date with his first girlfriend. That day, just like this, his girlfriend smiled at him, taking his hand, still a young boy, and leading him towards a distant stream. Looking at it again, how could this be the work of a young high school student? It was clearly the work of a longostablishhed master. President, what happened? The onlookers, seeing President Fujino staring blankly at a painting, quickly asked. However, President Fujino said nothing, merely handing Naoto's painting to the others to pass around. And these professional judges, upon seeing the painting handed to them by the president, all reacted just like President Fujino had earlier, frozen in place. Just one painting made people feel that sweet, sweet love. From an artistic perspective alone, this was absolutely a master-level work. There were even some aspects of paint application and compositional analysis that seemed so uncoordinated to them, yet in this painting, they formed a cohesive whole. Such strange painting techniques were something they had never seen before. President, is this a high school student's work? Is he here for this high school competition? Facing the judge's questions, the president turned to look at the receptionist from before. After receiving confirmation from the receptionist, everyone present numbly looked at the painting again. This person, isn't he here to fish for attention? 0 comments 0 vote. Bloodline results revealed. Chapter 12. Bloodline results revealed. With the arrival of the weekend, the weekly popularity poll was finally here. At this time, it was probably the most anxious and most excited moment for every manga artist and every editor. Because at this time, the future direction of several manga would be determined. Whether they would succeed in serialization or be quickly cancelled later depended entirely on the weekly popularity poll. A large part of the reason Jump has lasted so many years is because of this voting system. Although in many people's eyes, this system is indeed cruel, and many excellent manga have been cancelled because of it, which is a great pity. But it is precisely because of this system that Jump has always maintained extremely high popularity and a continuous stream of excellent works. Editor Saiki. I've brought the new popularity chart. At this moment, the highly anticipated popularity poll was finally out. When Saiki Kuriko received the report, he didn't dare to look at the information on it. Although he had great confidence in the manga Naoto had drawn, having confidence was one thing, whether readers would buy into it was another. After all, the tastes of adults and teenagers are completely different. Who knew if the manga they thought was good would appeal to those readers? With a nervous and uneasy heart, Mr. Kuriko slowly opened his eyes. But when he saw the data on the report card, he was completely dumbfounded. Are you sure this data is correct? Yes, they've double-checked it multiple times over there. It's definitely correct. It's truly unbelievable. Mr. Kuriko looked at the results for Bloodline, then excitedly jumped up. Seeing Mr. Kuriko like this, it should be clear by now. Yes, Bloodline is currently receiving great reviews in Jump. Not only that, among the newly published manga, it became the undisputed number one, with twice the votes of Ashirogi Muto's Second Earth, which was in second place. Even the established serialized manga couldn't compete. The only one that surpassed Bloodline was a manga that had just been animated last week, and it only narrowly beat Bloodline by virtue of that advantage. In the Bakuman worldview, although there are popular works like Death Note, Bleach, and One Piece, they are generally treated as non-existent due to being too exceptional. For a new manga to achieve such outstanding results, beating a multitude of other manga, was a miracle. Such a work is hard to find even once in 10 years. This time, they had truly found a treasure. Although it was only the first chapter, due to its packed plot, outstanding art style, likable character designs, and the suspense it left, everyone's evaluation of Bloodline was very high, and they were eager to read the subsequent story. Oh dear, I never expected it. We almost became number one this week. What a pity. Although his heart was already blooming with joy, Mr. Kuriko still feigned an expression of regret. The other editors, who had already received their report cards, were so angry their teeth ached when they heard Mr. Kuriko's words. Such results were an incredibly wonderful start. It could even be called the strongest newcomer. Yet this person was still acting dissatisfied. Was he looking for trouble? But even with such envy, jealousy, and hatred, everyone still couldn't do anything about Mr. Kuriko. Who could blame him when Mr. Kuriko's seniority was right there? Besides the chief editor and deputy editor, he was the most senior. If the chief editor or deputy editor were to leave, coupled with his achievement of discovering Naoto, he would probably be able to step right up. So even though Mr. Kuriko was so smug, everyone still dared not speak their anger. Senior Kuriko. The chief editor wants you in his office. Oh, coming. Upon hearing the chief editor call him, Mr. Kuriko hummed a tune and skipped into the office. A little while later, Naoto, who was deep in slumber, was woken up by the ringing of his phone. Uncle Kuriko, is something wrong? Seeing that it was a call from Mr. Kuriko, although his head was still muddled, Naoto still picked up the phone and asked. I'm sorry, Naoto, I have some bad news to tell you. On the other end of the phone, Mr. Kuriko spoke to Naoto in a very regretful tone. At this, Naoto instantly sobered up, hearing the unusual tone. Uncle Kuriko, are you saying, my manga it? At this moment, even if Naoto had the biggest heart, he couldn't help but feel a thump in his chest. Good heavens, he had already boasted so much. Surely, he wouldn't let it completely flop, would he? Although he had anticipated such a consequence, when it actually arrived, Naoto instantly felt his life turn gray. Well, I'm sorry, Naoto, I couldn't get you the next Jump cover. Just as Naoto thought his manga had been rejected, he didn't expect Mr. Kuriko on the other end to suddenly change the subject, leaving Naoto completely bewildered. Hello. Naoto, are you listening? Hello. Oh, yes, Uncle Kuriko, are you talking about the next Jump cover? At this moment, Naoto still thought he had misheard. How could the Jump cover have anything to do with him? Isn't that something for serialized manga artists? Oh, right, you don't know yet. Your manga, Bloodline, has received rave reviews, even beating a large number of serialized manga artists. But unfortunately, you ran into a manga that just got an anime adaptation, so you only came in second place. Otherwise, the next Jump cover would have been yours. Naoto, somewhat disbelieving, pinched his cheek to confirm he wasn't dreaming, then became even more confused. What did he mean, only came in second place? No, should a matter like this be described with the word, only? Why did Mr. Kuriko on the other end still seem a bit regretful? This isn't right at all. Even after hanging up the phone, Naoto still looked at his ceiling with disbelief. My goodness, a manga that had just finished its first chapter directly climbed to second place on the rankings. How is this any different from a novel that just finished its first chapter on a certain platform becoming second on the click-through list? Now, it's definitely time for serialization. Did he really become a serialized manga artist so easily? Did he become a jump serialized manga artist, something many manga professionals only dream of becoming? It wasn't until an hour later that Naoto finally came to his senses, confirming that he really wasn't dreaming. Okay, it's certain now, his family crisis seems to have been resolved.